What's going on, everyone? Today we have a very special guest. We have the son of Marcus Garvey, Dr. Julius Garvey. Now, Dr. Garvey, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
It's my pleasure to be on.
Now, most of you know that Dr. Garvey's father is the man that created Pan-Africanism, at least as we know it here in America. He has been noted to have prominent teachings. Many of you today are waving a flag. There's a Pan-African flag, the red, black, and green. Well, it's Dr. Garvey's father that came up with that flag. And we can get Dr. Garvey to tell us what was the inspiration that came to the creation of that flag. But Dr. Garvey, for many who do not know you, can you tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm the second son of Marcus Garvey. I have an older brother. He's Marcus Jr. I was born in Jamaica, went to school there, went to college in Canada at McGill University, and then did most of my surgical training here in the United States. And I'm a cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon.
Okay, so give us some history about your father, because there's some people that have never even heard about your father before. So this would be very educational about your father, Marcus Garvey, because he has been a very prominent figure here in the black community.
Yes, and it's unfortunate, that a lot of us don't know our own history. As my dad said, a people without a knowledge of their origins, history, and culture is like a tree without roots. And I think that's one of the problems in our African communities, is that we're not taught our history. We're taught a curriculum that doesn't value us and doesn't value our historic contributions to civilization over time. So, my dad came to this country in 1916 after traveling the world over and after reading Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery. And he thought that the Tuskegee Institute was a great model to be able to rebuild African civilization and African communities. Because at that time, 1914, as you know, in terms of worldwide, this was in the middle of colonialism. And it was obviously post-slavery. And there was coming up from the South at that time about 2 million blacks who were previously agricultural coming into the urban environment to find jobs. And again, this was the 1914-18 war with soldiers coming back. So there was a whole lot of ferment in the air about democracy and freedom. My father came into that milieu and articulated a message of self-sufficiency and looking back to the continent of Africa in terms of our beliefs, in terms of our culture, and trying to unite us as a people. In those days, he used to talk about 400 million black people. Now, of course, we are 1.2 billion, and we're numerically the third largest racial group. So still, the idea is to unite us as a people, because that gives us strength in numbers. And of course, the African continent is the richest continent in the world. So we need to be able to control that, to be able to maximize who we are as a people. So this was his message. And of course, a message like that ran counter to the doctrine of white supremacy. And of course, that was exemplified by J. Edgar Hoover, who felt that, white supremacy and its institutionalization within the American systems, in terms of voting rights and civil rights, etc., that was the norm. Whereas my father said, no, we require respect. And you had mentioned a little bit earlier about the red, black, and green. Well, he had the first international convention of African people in 1920. And with marching going from Harlem, 135th Street, down to Madison Square Gardens, filling Madison Square Garden, 25,000 people with overflow. And having, thousands upon thousands of delegates coming in from all over the world, including African countries. And that was the first international convention of African people. And out of that came the Declaration of the Rights of Negro Peoples of the World. And out of that came a flag and a national anthem for black people. Because one of the things that people in the South used to say, oh, the coon is nobody, he has no flag, he has no nation. So, the UNIA, the organization, nominated my father as, quotes, President General of Africa, and came up with the red, black, and green, which is symbolic, the red standing for the blood of our ancestors that's been shed in order to establish our civilization and during the hard times. The black is for phenotypical appearance. We're, of course, black people in that sense. And green is for the riches, both agricultural and otherwise. So that's the symbolism of the red, black, and green.
Yes, because a lot of people don't know that, and I'm glad you expounded on that because you have these white supremacists I've seen on the show trying to burn that flag, and they get upset when we wave that flag, but it has deep meaning, deep symbolism, and your father just wanted us just to do for ourselves. I don't think your father would want us to be depending on the government for anything, correct?
Precisely. I mean, as a citizen, you have certain rights, but in order to build community, then you have to unite within your community and build that. So that the jobs are in the community, the businesses support the community supports the business. That's how you become self-sufficient. And every ethnic group has used their unity as a group to advance within the American economic scheme. And you can look at it, the Irish did that, the Jewish people did that, the Chinese people did that, now the Koreans have done that, the Indians are doing that. Now, we neglected the message of Marcus Garvey, and part of that, of course, is due to the harassment of somebody like J. Edgar Hoover, and the fact that he was able to derail the movement because of the false charges, etc., etc. So we ended up with, of course, this misunderstanding of integration. There's nothing wrong with integration, but integration really means desegregation. It doesn't mean you depend on somebody else for your sustenance. You understand? So yes, we can sit at the table, but we have to bring our own knife and fork, and even bring our own meal when we sit at the table with somebody else. We have to come there with something. And what the something that we have is our community strength, which is our dollars, and which is our voting, and which is our belief system in terms of who we are and our history as a people. We have the longest history in the world because we were the first people ever. 200,000 years ago, that's where people started. Homo sapiens sapiens. That's us. So we have the oldest history, the longest history, and the longest in terms of civilization. So nobody can teach us. But we need to know our own history, and that was the basis of a lot of what he said.
Now, let me ask you a question. Why do you think the Asians, the Irish, and different other communities were allowed to do group economics to unify, but every time the black man and black woman unified, we always saw white supremacists destroying our towns, bombing our churches, destroying one of our great towns like in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Little Africa, or another name we call it Black Wall Street. Why is it that every time we try to do for ourselves, these white supremacists are coming versus other groups, they let them alone?
Well, quite frankly, we are the only ones that were enslaved, that came here and were enslaved. And along with the enslavement, a mentality had to have been developed. Because in order to identify a human being as a commodity, you have to dehumanize them, and you have to demonize them. You have to say they're nothing, there were cannibals in the country where they came from, what we're doing for them in terms of enslaving them is a wonderful thing for them, etc., etc. And you build on that. You destroy their history. The books have been burned all the way from the Romans. Have been burning our books in Egypt and in Alexandria. They burned the books in North Africa. They burned the books in Spain. So our books have been burned over and over, and then the history has been rewritten. So they've had the ability to rewrite our history because they've destroyed our books and they've co-opted our universities and our brightest minds. So now our PhDs are all indoctrinated in this system that says that we're inferior and we have no history. So in order to continue that and not look at the damage that has been done, then you have to continue more or less to beat us down as a people, where everybody else has been able to use their own strength as a community to offset what's called whiteness. Obviously Chinese are not white, Indians are not white, Koreans are not white per se, but sooner or later everybody gets an honorary white status in terms of the black community. And then of course the other thing, and we have to be honest about that, we've had dissension within our community, so that we have not been able to unify as we should have been able to unify. And this is one of our weaknesses.
And this dissension, at least from what I've studied in history and even just probably what you will see, it's always brought in by either COINTELPRO or something where they got to disrupt. Because you remember J. Edgar Hoover said, we got to prevent the rise of a black messiah.
Absolutely.
They don't want us to get together and do anything, just us, like I said. And then these same people will say, well, why black people can't do good for themselves? Why this? Why that? But y'all don't leave us the hell alone long enough to do good for ourselves. So
there's a great deal of truth in that. Yes.
if you look at today's climate that we're looking at, I did a story just the other day out of Cal State University, LA. The students wanted a safe space, or a lot they want to call it segregation, away from a lot of the students because they were getting called racial slurs. They were being attacked, harassed by campus police. But now they have their own safe space, and there are those who are angry and very upset outside of the black community about this issue. Now, would that be something that your father would promote to say, you know, we just need to kind of beat ourselves and deal with our issues?
Well, no question. I mean, you know, they have all kinds of fraternities and Greek letter fraternities, and every distinct ethnic group has their fraternity or their solidarity space. You see, but when it comes to us, there is always the attempt to break us up and individualize us. Well, you're not like them. Come and join our group. So again, it's an attack on our group solidarity, and it happens over and over again. And whenever a leader gets up that is strong enough to gather a large support behind them, you'll find that something happens to that leader. In terms of Marcus Garvey, they were able to falsify charges and then deport him because he was an immigrant and he could not get citizen status, although he tried. In terms of Malcolm X, he was shot. In terms of Martin Luther King, he was shot. And you can go down the line, you know, whether you want the Panthers or whatever it is. Or even now, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, somebody else jumps up and says Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter. I mean, you know, the point is that, you know, if right now it's Black lives that are under attack. So the correct response would be, gee, I understand where you're coming from. And we see those horrible videos and we empathize. But very often we get the opposite, as if to say we shouldn't even raise our voices in protest. So it's really a continued attempt to keep us in a dependent status and to neutralize any voice or any action that would move us away from that.
You know, I know more and more people that's even, you know, young people is reading your father's work, really, you know, believing in the work that your father was putting out inside the community. But one thing your father had to deal with within his own organization is those who were considered agents. And though it's funny to me why would you want to mess up something that can help all of us, including yourself? Because these people don't realize that, I say, Massa don't have a history of being loyal to his little whipping boy and whipping girl. He always turns on them and try to throw them back to the black community.
But you see, again, it's, you know, we've drunk too deep at the well of individualism, which is what is preached by the majority group. But when you look at it, they didn't get where they are by individualism. They got where they are by group conquest and force of arms. It wasn't individuals going out there and saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. You see, this whole business of individual accomplishment is a myth. You see, first of all, the land was taken away from the Native American. How did that happen? It wasn't individuals going out there and saying, well, you know, I'm going to farm this little piece of land. No, the army went out there, wiped out the Indians in a particular area, and then said, okay, you guys, come on in. You see, and then 100,000 came or 1 million came, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, in order to move forward, you really have to take advantage of your group strength. Individualism, as it is portrayed within the white communities after they have captured the wealth and now they're sharing it up among individuals. So we don't understand that. We think individualism is the way to go to get over. You see, and then one guy walks through the door and they say, come on in. But then they close the door behind the one guy. You see, and they say, well, look, because this allows the white liberals to say, well, look at this guy. He's up there on TV as a show or whatever it is. He could succeed. Why couldn't everybody else succeed? Well, the door is closed for everybody else, you see. And then some other guy comes and he knocks hard enough and another one guy gets in, you see. So that, how should I say, sets the stage for the individual who is looking for a way to get over.
Correct.
And you will sell out this community. When you get right down to it, individualism is greed, and you'll sell anybody.
Correct. Now, one thing that your father promoted and your father really wanted us to do, he wanted a lot of us to return home. And you would think that the white supremacists would be like, yeah, shoot, go. I help you send them back. That's fine. We don't want you here. But yet he was met with so much opposition for wanting black people to go back to Africa. Mm-hmm. See, this is the craziness of white supremacy. You don't want us here. Then we say we want to leave or get away from you, and you get mad about that too. Could you please explain to me, maybe you know more than me,
well,
what's the mentality of these people?
It's not that crazy, because when you look at it, you have to look at it from the perspective of world domination. You see, what Marcus Garvey wanted is for us over here, who had been exposed to certain techniques and technology and so on in terms of industrialization, because that's where we were at the beginning of the 20th century. We were industrializing. And he wanted those of us who have the abilities and the wherewithal in terms of building industries and participating in industrial development to have a space in Africa to do that, to build nations in Africa. He wasn't looking to bring the hoi polloi over there. It was a matter of development. Now, when you look at that, and this was where he was frustrated, for example, in Liberia, you see the same land that when he sent his agents over there was promised to him by President King, who was the president of Liberia at that time. Okay, once the government agents from the United States went over there and spoke to King, King had already written an agreement with the UNIA that they would have this land for development. They could bring their equipment, etc., etc. Okay, so $250,000 worth of equipment went. It was sitting on the wall. Okay, agents got there, and then King changed his mind. Not only did he change his mind, but the same land that was promised to the UNIA, my dad's organization, went to Firestone for rubber, because this was a hot commodity at that time in the war for rubber tires. So we sold, meaning Liberia, the President King and his acolytes sold Liberia to Firestone when Garvey was bringing blacks there to develop Liberia as a free country. And that would be the base in Africa. So you see, these people are not that crazy. By that I mean that they will frustrate our development here in the United States, but they also frustrate the development in Africa. As you can see, that is what is happening in all the different African countries. There was a coup against Kwame Nkrumah. Patrice Lumumba was killed. They've demonized Mugabe. Any black leader who stands up in Africa against a European American policy, pretty soon there's a coup against them. And if they're not assassinated, they're voted out of office, etc., etc. And pretty soon they come up on charges, etc., etc. So it's a worldwide system. It's not a national system. And it has to be seen from that perspective. It's world domination. That's what globalization is. It's world domination by a capitalist economy that, skews wealth so that you have an elite corporate structure at the top and the rest of us are being pauperized.
Now, just from what I have seen and just all over the world, it's been a shift, though, because global white supremacy has been having a stronghold on the whole world, but I'm seeing they're losing their grip. More and more countries are starting to call America out. You even got Russia calling America out. China was extremely rude the other day, to the president, and they, really don't have a lot of good things to say about America. You have the Philippine president calling America out for killing black people in the street, but try to tell him something. There's all these different leaders now starting to rebuke America. Have you seen, this change that's going on in the world, and do you think that white supremacy is on its way out?
Yes and no. I mean, there's definitely a change. But I think that the system that has been set up by white supremacy is extremely strong. It's the globalized economic system, and it has such a stranglehold on the countries of the world. Everybody ends up subscribing to it, even those countries that you have talked about, for example, China. China is part of the G7 or the top 8, industrialized countries. So is Japan, etc. You see, so everybody participates to some degree. So I agree with what you say, that the tide is turning, but it's going to be a slow outgoing tide. It's not happening tomorrow, not in my generation. Perhaps in your generation, you'll see a more significant shift.
Okay, so when it came to your father, you were talking about all the different leaders earlier, things that happened to them. What was the exact charges that J. Edgar Hoover put on your father?
Conspiracy to use the mail to defraud.
That's nothing.
Well, not only is it nothing, there was no evidence, because the only evidence that was at the trial was an empty envelope. And the envelope was presented as evidence by a witness who admitted that he was perjuring himself, and he had been coached to perjure by the prosecuting attorney, because he said that he worked for the UNIA, etc., and he couldn't tell who gave him his paycheck, where he picked up the paycheck, and exactly how long he worked there at the UNIA. So there was perjury all through the trial, and there was absolutely no evidence. And the judge confused both himself and the attorney, confused the jury, because the charge that supposedly my father was convicted on had been withdrawn and thrown out because of lack of evidence. So it was really quite a farce.
And J. Edgar Hoover was known for doing that, to black men. Like yesterday, we had interviewed Abraham Bolden, the first Secret Service agent, and he was speaking about how they did literally the same thing to him, Secret Service and the FBI, how they conspired against him because he had certain information. And people don't realize how treacherous J. Edgar Hoover was to the black community. When I went to Washington, D.C. last year with the Million Man March and we did the coverage, I was just really upset to even see his name on a building.
It's funny, I was in Washington yesterday, and somebody asked me that question, how do I feel when I pass on 9th Street and see his name? I said, I don't go there, But J. Edgar Hoover, in 1919, the Bureau of Investigation, as it was called, it was the prototype for the FBI, and he was in charge of it. And he had an internal memo back there in 1919. There's a Negro liberator up in Harlem. We've got to get him. So they were just looking for something. And it didn't matter what it was. They needed a charge to come up on. As a matter of fact, I think they're looking on a charge to, what is that thing, transporting somebody across state lines. But it was my wife, my mother, that they were trying to bring a charge against my father for carrying her across state lines. They didn't know that they were married. So that was the skullduggery that was going on.
So when it comes to your father, did you go with him when he was sent away, or did you end up staying here?
No, we were born, myself and my brother were born back in Jamaica.
Okay.
He went to prison in Atlanta in 1925 after his appeal was turned down. And the sentence was commuted by Calvin Coolidge in 27. But they wouldn't allow him 1 minute to even set the organization right or whatever. They just put him on a ship in New Orleans and sent him back to Jamaica. So he went back in 27 and started the organization again there, trying to hold the pieces of it together here in the United States. And we were born there in Jamaica.
Okay. So, and also your father eventually left Jamaica, and I think he went to a European country. What country did he go to after that?
But he went to England in 1935, and we went over and joined him over there. So my early years were spent in England. And then we came back to Jamaica just before the war, when things were heating up, and the weather was not good for my brother, who had arthritis in his leg. So we came back to the warm climate. My father died in England in 1940, at the height of the war. And we were, quote, safely back in Jamaica.
Okay, so you have this petition trying to get President Obama to pardon your father, correct?
Yes.
Okay, could you explain to people what that petition's about and how they can, be a part of that?
Well, first of all, go to justice numero 4 for Garvey .org. Justice for Garvey.org. That's the number 4, not FOUR, the number 4. But, this goes back a long ways. From 1983, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Eddie Seaga, went to Reagan and asked him for a posthumous pardon or an exoneration. It didn't happen. In 1987, Congressman Conyers, he was head of the House Judiciary Committee, and he organized the committee down there. We went to D.C., and myself, my brother, John Henry Clark, Tony Martin, and a bunch of us, Judith Stein, to explain, the significance of Garvey and so on and so forth, and then to ask the judiciary, to move through the Congress that he would be exonerated. That didn't work. Congressman Rangel, ever since 2004, has had, resolutions, HCON resolution, this, that, and the other, asking for the exoneration of Marcus Garvey. So it's a process that has been going on for a long time, and it has not prevailed. Now, this is, in a sense, the last straw, or the last legal avenue that we have, which is to get a posthumous pardon from the president. So that's why it's extremely important, with the window that we have. And we've initiated the pardon process, but we need 100,000 signatures by September the 28th. So we're asking everybody within hearing distance to go to justiceforgarvey.org, and there's a link to whitehouse.gov where the petition is, to go and sign and get as many people to sign as possible.
Okay, so you guys, we need to try to get this petition signed, and help out Dr. Garvey to get his father pardoned, because President Obama should do that. He's pardoning a lot of people right now. I'm seeing that, so I don't think it would be no issue for the president to do this. So just make sure you check that out. Share the link with everybody. Get them to sign. Like I say, if you believe in Marcus Garvey and his work, and just want his name cleared, because he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't. He was just suffering at the hands of a white supremacist named J. Edgar Hoover that was leading the FBI. Just bottom line, that man has been treacherous to our people, many times. Even the great Dr. King, that a lot of people say we should be like, he was extremely treacherous to him as well. So Dr. Garvey, I want to ask you a question about just the climate that you see today. All the things with the racial tensions that's going on. Do you see the 50s and 40s just repeating themselves, or you have something that's totally different that's going on?
I think they're repeating themselves because in some sense you have a new generation, and you have the youngsters out there. I'm not sure they know enough of their history, because I think if they knew more of their history, they could even be more productive in terms of their protests and the solution to the problems that are present in the black community. But I think the youngsters realize that what has happened in America, and whether it's the liberal white Democrats or it's their own leadership, it has failed. It is not doing anything for the black community, because you have 50% of young black men dropping out of high school. You have 40% of young black men involved in the criminal justice system. You have, teenagers are getting pregnant. 60% of black households are a single parent, mother running the household, and she's trying to work and grow up, children. So, and there's lack of job opportunities in the black community. So everything is poised in the black community for failure. And that's why you have black on black violence, because, you can't get a job. You end up stealing or trying to take something from somebody else and so on and so forth. So they understand that something needs to be done in the communities. And up to now, the system has failed them. Now, they need to know now, okay, how do we go forward and help to change the system so that it favors to a significant degree the young black man and woman, boy and girl within the black community, without having to get bussed across town or having to run outside and get a job somewhere outside of their community. But you need credit, you need job training, you need proper education within the community, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I keep saying this, that we in the black community must divorce the Democrats, because they haven't done a thing for us but spiral us down further and further and further, and we have been faithful to them wholesale. We have,
Yes.
and I don't know why you think Hillary is going to do anything for you. She's not going to do a thing for you. I'm not saying go to Trump. That's not even what I'm telling people. I'm
Yeah.
just saying make them come to us and bring us a concrete plan of what they're going to do. Don't just give them your votes.
You're right. You're right. I mean, we need to present them with a plan. And it's a plan that has been debated and discussed within the black community, and everybody signs on. And everybody knows if this plan doesn't go through, then, we're going to stop some things until this happens. Because, there's 35 million of us. Come on. That's more than a nation. That's more than many, many nations. So if we're organized and we're unified, we can get things done.
I mean, really, the power is in our hands as well, because I keep telling people, if we stage the greatest economic boycott America's ever seen, we can literally get everything we want. We don't have to, like Dr. King said, we don't have to throw Molotov cocktails. We don't have to commit a crime. Just hold our money.
Yeah.
That's all we got to do. And they fear that, because every time I mention that, it would other people, why do you want to do that? Why you want to hurt businesses? I say, oh, that's the weapon. Got it. Because you're afraid just to even talk of it in our community. But Dr. Garvey, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. We're definitely going to put the link up for everyone to go sign the petition. Make sure you get there. Tell all your friends. We have to September 28th for the signatures to get up to 100,000. How many signatures do you have now, Dr. Garvey?
We only have about 7,000.
7,000.
We haven't
Okay.
wasted time. We need to get there quickly.
Okay. So I know you guys are good at this. If I'm asking everyone that's watching the video or everyone that's subscribed, please go over, sign the petition, and let's see if we can put some heat on President Obama to do something for Marcus Garvey, one of our great heroes in our community. So, Dr. Garvey, thank you very much for joining us, and you have a blessed day.
And thank you for having me.